Don't click that remote. Don't move, because if you do, if you go away from your TV set at all, you're going to miss a really, really, really good show. Guess what? You're going to see Bruce Rauner. He's the Republican primary. He's the Republican candidate for governor in the general election in the fall. We're taping this little intro on March 31, 2014. You'll see Bruce. You'll see Bruce before he won the Republican gubernatorial primary. You're going to see Jim Edgar. Well, you may say, what's that about? Well, you'll see him 2 days before the Republican primary. You'll see Kirk Dillard. Oh, you're going to see so much. You're going to see some discussion of the pension vote. That's going to be important. Remember that state pension reform? That'll be important in May, in June, in August, in October, in November, all along the way. Oh, there's so much more. I can't even tell you. But don't you click that remote, because if you do, you're going to miss a really, 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 really good show. You're watching Public Affairs. Berkowitz is my name, and politics is our game, and you're going to be seeing lots of politics and public policy, as I've said on other intros. And this intro, if you've been watching our show, you've been seeing a bunch of edited shows. We had to get somewhat ahead of the game, because Comcast closed the Comcast Skokie studio on March 31. So as I sit here, if Public Affairs is going to continue, it has to be coming to you not from Skokie, not unless we can turn everything upside down. I don't think we can do that. So we're going to be coming to you from Evanston, coming to you from Mount Prospect, coming to you from Chicago, or maybe from TTW, or maybe from 25, we don't know. But for now, what you're going to get to see, you're going to get to see an edited show. And this, as I promised, you'll see Bruce Rauner, he's the Republican candidate for governor in the general election against Pat Quinn. You'll see him speaking in the primary. You'll see him questioned by Jeff Berkowitz. Oh, and you're going to see Jim Edgar. That's interesting. You're going to see Jim Edgar and Kirk Dillard talking right before, 2 days before the Republican gubernatorial primary election. Why? Because that stuff carries over. What role will Kirk Dillard have to play, or Jim Edgar, in the general election with Bruce Rauner running as the Republican nominee for governor? Will that pension reform vote that you'll see being discussed, will that still be important? Even though it was talking about how Jim Edgar would have voted, would it have been different as to how Bruce Rauner would have voted, or Kirk Dillard did vote, or does Jim Edgar even have juice? Yep, you'll find out from Jim Edgar in his own view. Does he have juice? What does his wife have to say about that? Oh, but seriously, how did the unions get all involved here? And what were they doing to Kirk Dillard? Were they out there telling their voters, their members, to vote for Kirk Dillard and then switch in the general election? Was Kirk Dillard being cynical when he cast his no vote on pension reform? Will that somehow affect the way things happen as this all gets hashed out in the November election? And what role will Paul Vallis play, who's the lieutenant governor candidate, in education and school choice? And oh, sort of you'll get all of that essence as you watch Jim Edgar, as you watch Kirk Dillard, as you watch Bruce Rauner, perhaps even as you watch, who knows? You never know on this show. We never know what's coming up. Might even see a little bit of Bill Brady. Who knows? You never know, but what I do know is going to be a good show. You're going to see lots of good politics, lots of good public policy. And just remember, come back next week and every week to do what? To watch Public Affairs.
Okay. Thank you all for coming. For the past 7 months, I've been crisscrossing the state and sharing the message that Illinois needs the right kind of leadership and a plan to make our state work again. Kirk Dillard is the leader we need. He knows what it takes to balance the budget. He knows how to pay the bills on time. He knows how to work with a Democrat-controlled legislature to find solutions to serious problems. He learned a lot of that from his mentor, Governor Jim Edgar. Governor Edgar was the last great governor of this state. Under his leadership, there was a sense of balance and stability in Springfield. We will bring that back. Governor Edgar wasn't one to threaten and intimidate people. He didn't throw slogans around in place of substance. He did the work of building consensus and pulling people together. You'd never hear him talk about hammering anything unless he was building something, and the only shake he needed was one that came with a burger and fries. I believe that we are tested and prepared, the team to deliver and change the change that people are so longing for. And I think Governor Edgar's influence will be widely seen in the Dillard-Tracy administration. So thank you for joining us, and now it's my pleasure to introduce Governor Jim Edgar.
Thank you, Jill. You know, one of the most important traits of a good governor is being able to assemble a good team. And I've always thought that the best way to determine whether a person is going to be a good governor and have a good team is who that person picks for his or her running mate. And I think Kirk Dillard's pick of Jill Tracy as his lieutenant governor candidate underscores the type of people that Kirk Dillard would put around him. If you look at the other three candidates for lieutenant governor, none of them have the experience and the qualifications that Jill Tracy does. And I think that speaks well for the type of team that Kirk Dillard, once he becomes governor, will assemble. Now, I'm here today for two reasons. One, and let me stress this, the outcome of this election on Tuesday is still in doubt. It's going to be determined by turnout. And we won't know till Tuesday night just what that turnout's going to be. Secondly, and more importantly, I'm here because there's one candidate in either party running for governor who I believe has the ability, has the experience, has the skills that's necessary to get Illinois back on track, and that's Kirk Dillard. Kirk served as my chief of staff when I became governor. And when I became governor, the state faces very similar problems that we face today. The state's finances were in disarray. The economy was stagnant. We had some real problems. But Kirk, working with me, helped us put together a plan to get this state out of its problems. As a result of the plan and the team we put together, this state went from paying bills 6 or a year later to paying bills on time. We had the largest budget surplus in the history of this state, and people had confidence in state government. That's the type of experience and skills that Kirk Dillard demonstrated in the 90s, and he can do that again in 2015 when he's sworn in as governor. Also, Kirk has the skill of bringing people together. And again, I can't stress too much to people out there how important that is. The governor has to be the person who brings people together. The governor can't be the divider. And particularly if you're a Republican governor, and we're going to be dealing with the Democratic legislature. As a result of that map they drew, there's no hope that we're going to have a Republican-controlled legislature. So the governor has to have the ability to work across party lines to get things done. And Kirk has demonstrated that throughout his time in politics, and he also has demonstrated that in his campaign. He's brought together a wide coalition, and I think that will serve him well when he becomes governor. The state faces some very serious problems right now. We can't afford a governor who has to learn on the job. We can't afford a governor who's going to divide this state. We need a governor who will bring people together. We need a governor who will hit the ground running once he is sworn in. We need Kirk Dillard. It's my pleasure to introduce the next governor of the state of Illinois, Kirk Dillard.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, and thank you all, especially on a Sunday, for coming out this early. And let me begin with special thanks to Governor Edgar. You've been so helpful to me during my campaign, and like I've said many times before, Stephanie, Emma, and Ava, and I can't thank you enough, especially for traveling with us these last couple of days of the campaign. 8 months ago, I announced my candidacy for governor in a three-flat, or right in front of a three-flat that I grew up with on Magnolia Avenue with my immigrant grandparents here in Chicago. We flew to Decatur, Illinois, my wife's ancestral home area, with Governor Edgar. And for the last 8 months, I've crisscrossed this state with the same message. Illinois is broken. Illinois is not working. And I'm tested and I'm prepared, and I am the change that we need. Along that way, I was blessed to be joined by my running mate, Lieutenant Governor to be Jill Tracy. She's the great mother of 4. She's an attorney. She's a brilliant businesswoman. And I can't thank the Tracy family enough for joining the Dillards in this quest to make Illinois work again. She stands head and shoulders above all of the other candidates for Lieutenant Governor, as Governor Edgar has so eloquently said. Thank you, Jill, for your time, your commitment to make this state work again. Now, Jill and I don't offer clever slogans or slick television commercials. We offer solutions and we offer competency. And the first solution is to send Pat Quinn packing. Pat Quinn is either unaware of our problems or he is unable to fix them. Our unemployment rate is the 3rd highest in America, and we rate dead last in job creation, and people and employers are leaving this state with their feet. Jill and I are the only team that can send Pat Quinn packing in November, and we are the real change that Illinois needs. We've outlined our plans to make Illinois a destination economy for people like the Tracys and other job creators. Our plans are to cut spending, cut it as I did as Governor Edgar's Chief of Staff. Our plans are to improve our schools, our farms, our factories, and our communities for a future generation like my children and your children and grandchildren. And I'm proud of the endorsements I've received from throughout the state of Illinois. I was looking at this chart over here, which looked like an NCAA basketball tournament, but those endorsements mean a lot to Jill and I, and they lead to the governorship. I'm proud of the support we've received from conservatives around the state, but I'm also proud to be supported by educators who teach my children and our children, policemen, prison guards who protect us from gangs, engineers who keep our roads safe, and state employees who make sure that government works for those who truly need it, the most vulnerable of our society. And I'm proud of Jill's and my record, both in business and in the legislature. Jill and I are citizen legislators. We both have jobs that have created private sector jobs for the people and families of Illinois. And I'm very proud of the fact that my candidacy is endorsed wholeheartedly by Governor Edgar. But let me say it again. Sending Pat Quinn packing is not going to be easy. You can't beat Pat Quinn with a nominee who's so close to Democrats like Rahm Emanuel that they vacation together. You can't beat Pat Quinn with a nominee who dodges questions, who won't talk to the media, and has incredibly questionable business dealings. And you can't beat Pat Quinn with somebody who's burdened with Rod Blagojevich-type pay-to-play scandals, and also somebody who is a City Hall insider. And you're not going to beat Pat Quinn with a bazillionaire who's so out of touch with working families that he sees nothing wrong with bending the rules that all other Illinoisans have to live with. There can't be one set of rules for billionaires and another set of rules for everybody else in Illinois. You know, we can't let the 0.01% decide what's the best for the rest of Illinois. It's just not right, and that's not the Illinois that I grew up in. The stakes have never been higher for the land of Lincoln. Jill Tracy and I have the integrity, we have the experience, we certainly have the tenacity to bring and make Illinois work again and to find jobs for Illinois' family and our future. So we're asking people for their votes so we can begin to turn this state around. We're asking for people's votes so we can bring our fresh ideas, the destination economy vision, and the new leadership to state government that Jill and I share. And we're asking for your vote to put an end to tight-fisted, one-party and one-city control of Illinois that has brought us to the brink of disaster. So we thank you for joining us here today. We thank you for your support. We're asking everybody to tell their friends and their neighbors to vote for Kirk Dillard and Jill Tracy. Take a Republican ballot. Save your state on Tuesday. Jill and I are tested and prepared. We're ready to lead from day one. So it's time to make Illinois work again, and all three of us look forward to answering your questions. And thanks for coming on a Sunday morning. Yes, sir.
Kirk, with all due respect, Governor Edgar hasn't won an election in 20 years. Does he still have juice?
Yes, and I
asked the same thing.
Governor Edgar, I believe, is still the state's most respected political figure. I'm not going to give you my polling numbers, but just trust me, when you use the word Jim Edgar and fiscal solvency and stability, there is no one better in the 12.5 million Illinoisans that could say Kirk Dillard and Jill Tracy are the team to make this state work again. So, yes, Governor Edgar has tremendous credibility among all segments and geographic regions of Illinois. He's still the man.
Since 24 years ago, when the last time he really had to fight in a Republican primary, the nature of Republican primaries has changed quite a bit, as you know, because you can swim in this pool. By today's standards, he's a communist, socialist, Muslim, union-loving, big government, all those horrible things. That's what he is in right-wing world today.
But he's the one guy who oversaw an administration that Wall Street increased the credit rating of the state of Illinois. He left $1.5 billion surplus during a recession. He paid the state's bills in 17 days, so those conservatives ought to like that. But the most important statistic of Jim Edgar is that he oversaw a state that had an unemployment rate well below the national average. In fact, the unemployment rate when Jim Edgar left office was less than half of what it is today. So I will always take Governor Edgar as the voucher that I can get a Democrat legislature to live within his means, just as he and I did together. Whether it was in the 1990s or whether it's now, the dynamics are still the same. And the last time I looked, Speaker Madigan and John Cullerton were there then, and they're there now.
Governor Edgar, Bruce Stolt from the Chicago Tribune wondered a few days ago about the $500,000 that he said you had in your campaign contribution fund still. He said you were giving $25,000 to Kirk Dillard, but why not throw all $500,000 his way so he could have a big TV buy in the next day or two?
Bruce is pretty good with other people's money. I think we've given about $100,000 at this point. And, to be very truthful, I don't think I'm going to have any more campaign money, and I do dole that out to charities. A lot of it goes to charities. But instead of giving him money, I showed up here today and the next day. Again, I'll match Bruce's contributions to anybody.
Let me ask you, you talked a lot about ethics and conflict of interest when you were there as governor. As you know, Rauner has said public sector unions are an inherent conflict of interest. The guy you're supporting here, Senator Dillard, he supported state employee pension reform right up to the vote. Then he said no. Then he said, maybe he should listen to he should get some input from the state employees who were members of those teachers unions and see if they were hurt. And then the teachers unions turned around, as you know, and supported Senator Dillard, gave him money, and then they sent out a mailer in the last few days citing that, saying Senator Dillard said he's got to listen to the input of whether the state
He said that,
are hurt.
just correct, he said that before he voted, that he thought that they should have input into this, and unfortunately they didn't. I mean, Speaker Madigan and a few business guys from Chicago pretty much rammed that through. And I would have voted against it. I think it's clearly unconstitutional. I don't think it's fair. I think employees, retirees have to pay, but I think everybody has to pay. And so I think there's good reason why he voted the way he did. But I also think it's reasonable. And when I was in Springfield, the way we got things done was we tried to bring the various parties in and see if we could reach a consensus. You can't just ram things through. It's happened the last few years, and you can see what kind of government we've had. So I think his vote personally was correct, I think for the right reasons. And if I was the public employees union looking at the choices they had, wouldn't you support somebody that at least will listen to you as opposed to people who don't even let you come to the table? So again, if you look at Kirk Dillard's record, there's a lot of reasons why some of those labor people may not like all of his record, but at least he was willing to listen to them. And as governor, you have to be willing to listen to everybody in this state. If you're governor for the state of Illinois, you have to be governor for everybody. You can't just be governor for a bunch of rich Republicans or Chicago Democrats. You have to represent everyone. And I think that vote demonstrated that Kirk has that ability. So I view that as a positive, not as a negative.
Do you view the teacher union support as a plus in the Republican primary?
I've had the IEA for me and I've had them against me. I'd rather have them for me. I don't think you have to change your philosophy, and I don't think Kirk did. I think they looked at what the choice was. And Kirk has demonstrated throughout his career, while you may disagree with him, he's not disagreeable. He's someone who you can work with and try to reason with. So when I was running, I wanted everyone's support, short of maybe somebody that had been indicted. So no, I think it's good. But I think it also underscores why Kirk needs to be the Republican nominee. He has the best chance, maybe the only chance, of beating Pat Quinn come November, because he can reach not just Republican voters, but independents and Democrats. And let me tell you, as someone who ran for statewide office 4 times, I know it was back in the dark ages, but even then, this was a Democratic state. It's more is today. So you have to bring some Democrats, thoughtful Democrats, and independents in for a Republican to win. And I think, again, Kirk has demonstrated that ability to work and to reach out outside of just purely Republicans to put together the coalition that can win in November.
Is it hypocritical to say that that pension bill was rammed through and, with all due respect, Jill Tracy worked on that?
Well, I think Jill and I probably have a different point of view on that. I viewed it, I say ran through, I think the employees ought to have more input, personally. I know some of the, and I don't want to take anything away from Jill, but I know the speaker pretty well, and I like him. That's heresy in the Republican Party. But I also know how he can be at times when he decides he wants to do something. He wanted to pass that pension bill. I thought John Cullerton had a much more fair and constitutional approach. And unfortunately, he lost out in that. And that wasn't just partisan. I mean, you had the Republican leader in the Senate, along with the Speaker of the House. So it was not so much a partisan issue, maybe philosophical. But I would say if the Speaker hadn't been for it, that wouldn't have happened.
We've got time for one more question. They have to get on the road or in the air. Anybody?
Governor Edgar, what would you do on state employee pension reform?
Hang on. Let's just take this question back
Yeah.
here. Thank-
Why do you think that Bruce Rauner has resonated so much with the state? Other people have spent a lot of money in the past.
Nobody has, it's one word, it's money. I don't care, I mean, nobody has spent as much as he's spent in any campaign when the other candidates have had as little as they've had. You can talk about Ron Gidwitz. I don't think he spent as much. I don't think it was as well. I will give Bruce Rauner credit. I think he's hired some pretty good people, and they've run a very smart Republican primary campaign. I'm not sure how good that's going to be in the general election. That worries me as a Republican. But if he had the same amount of money as Kirk Dillard would be ahead of him 3-1 in the polls today. It's purely money, in my estimation, of why he has the lead he has in the polls. The only thing I would also caution you, and I've been through primaries, it's very difficult to poll in a primary. Those poll numbers are not as accurate. Turnout is the key. You don't know what the turnout's going to be. You don't know how many crossover votes there might be. So I think what success he's had, I will give most of the credit to money. And, if I was running, if I had the choice between having money and not having money, I'd want money too.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody, very much. Thank you. There you go, Jill. Thanks, everybody, especially on a Sunday morning. We really appreciate you coming out.
How you doing?
Good to see you. So can you give us a quick comment? What would you like to see in state employee pension reform?
Well, I would like to see that, I think Cullerton's approach was probably constitutional, where retirees have to pay some, but also some has to come from the taxpayers who got kind of a free ride there for many years when the state didn't pay in as enough as they need. You don't need 100% funding. Everybody's not going to retire at the same time. I think we definitely need a lot more than we have now. I mean, we need to get up 70, 80%. So again, but I think you got to have something that's constitutional. I mean, if you read the transcripts of the Constitutional Convention, this provision was put in there clearly was to prevent what occurred from happening. Right or wrong, that's the Constitution. Unless you're going to amend the Constitution, I think you have to work within that framework.
They used to say the U.S. Supreme Court listens to the election returns. Do you think the state Supreme Court might be listening to the election returns?
I'm not sure the election return. They might listen to maybe one person a lot.
But do you think there's a major concern across the state of Illinois?
Well, I think there's a concern.
State employee pensions.
I think there's a concern.
The unions have to do more to maintain the economic stability of the state of Illinois.
I don't think you can blame it on the unions on this one. This was our fault in government over the years. But I think that the solution, everybody's going to have to pay a little bit. But you also have to make it constitutional. Now, if we're not going to follow the Constitution, let's get rid of that. I mean, I have a lot of innovative ideas, but I think we have to follow the Constitution.
There's a movement to amend the Constitution, maybe, and have a progressive income tax. How do you feel about that?
I've always thought the flat rates work pretty well in Illinois. We've got a progressive federal. I think the balance with having a flat rate in Illinois where we don't have a lot of exemptions and the wealthy can't shoulder a lot of their money, I think has a lot of appeal to me.
All right. Thank you so much, Kevin.
Yeah, good to see you.
Good to see you.
Nobody knows who Bruce Rauner is, but he's an ultimate insider. He's the worst kind of insider. He's the one that has done the buying in every stage of his personal, professional, and political career. And this state, having had the scandals that we've had in the governorship, should never let anybody that had Stuart Levine on a payroll for $1 million getting $50 million from a board that Levine sat on ever sniff the office of the governor.
Kirk, you heard Rauner say tonight, when you invest in 400 companies, you're going to have a few bad apples, like Michigan, like a few others. What's your response? I mean, he's human, he's a smart guy. Invest in 400 companies, a few go bad. You think he's disqualified to be governor?
Well, I think when you have one company where people go to a federal penitentiary, that's too many. He has many, 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 many companies that have gone bad. And no one's gone to jail yet for the nursing home scandal in California. But when you run a series of nursing homes and don't have anyone with healthcare experience on your board of directors, and people have died there, that is a callous disregard for human life. And we saw tonight that Mr. Rauner doesn't have a very good grasp of the office of the governor. He thinks he can do executive orders. He clearly is unprepared and does not understand what the powers of the office of the governor are. But I don't know how many different scandals you have to have with people going to federal penitentiaries of businesses that you're involved in before you get the picture. And I don't want somebody that has a callous disregard for human life in charge of the Department of Children and Family Services or the state's Medicaid program. And the man tonight proved that he does not understand what the office of the governor is about.
Kirk Dillard says, if anything, you're smart. He says Stu Levine was pestering you. He says Stu Levine was out there receiving money from your companies. He says Stu Levine was out there getting you business. He says if you're as smart as you tell the people of Illinois you are, you had to know about this. What do you say to Kirk Dillard?
Baloney. I don't know Levine, never interacted with him. And this issue that somehow we as investors know every board member of every foundation or every pension fund we work with, we don't. We interact with the staffs. We don't interact with the boards. They are faceless folks sitting up behind a podium when we present. We don't know the folks on the boards, and I've never interacted with them.
What did you get from it?